So this episode was absolutely incredibly done on every level and also devastating. I am not okay. I hate seeing the dragons get hurt. I have no idea why I'm watching this show. I really can't handle it. Why would you take that 0-year-old puppy into battle? He's just a baby. He has no idea what's coming. Get him away from there. The VFX artist and the sound designers did so brilliantly at making these dragons feel like real living creatures with personalities. This took me way longer than it should have to write because I kept going back to watch a specific moment or scene and then I just kept watching. This is what this entire season has been leading up to. You can't just open with a battle like this, you have to earn it and put the pieces into place, and it definitely paid off. I may have had some minor logistical quibbles with the battle, but everything worked on a character level, and I think that that's what truly makes a great battle sequence. Let's start out with the Harrenhal plotline, which was amazing again this week. In his dreams, Daemon sees three figures. It kind of gave me Ebenezer Scrooge vibes. They can't really be classified into past, present, and future, but they are the consequences of his actions, and his own ghosts come back to haunt him. And I don't think they're meant to make him change his ways and become a better man, more to occupy and unsettle him, and maybe a secret third thing. And Alice Rivers is Marley's ghost, I guess. I don't know. It's been over a decade since I saw the Muppet movie. Speaking of Muppets, what the fuck, Ryan Condal? Muppet Tell the Erasure is not okay. First, Daemon has another vision of young Rhaenyra, this time in the throne room, and she is speaking in High Valyrian, but he can't understand it, and we as the audience only get subtitles for the very last part. But David J. Peterson, who created High Valyrian and the other fictional languages in this world, posted a translation to his AO3 page. Daemon's feelings about Rhaenyra have always been conflicted. He does have love for her, but his brother's love was always what he wanted the most, and she was both a conduit and a hindrance towards that. Young Rhaenyra here is wearing the same gown that adult Rhaenyra was wearing in the final episode of the first season, when Daemon put the crown on her head, and then later in the episode choked her. When Daemon and Rhaenyra meet on the Dragonstone Bridge in episode 3 of season 1, she dares him to strike her down, and here he does that, and her crown falls to the floor. Alice Rivers says that sleep can be thin in this place, and these visions are bleeding into his waking life, quite literally, as he sees blood on his hands when he first wakes up after beheading Dream Rhaenyra. And then he immediately goes and asks a kid to murder his granddad, because Daemon is the funniest character on this show now, and I love it.
Well, my time is short and I have need of an army. Perhaps you might place a feather pillow over his head and speed along your inheritance.
In his next dream, he pursues someone who appears to be Aemond through the corridors of Harrenhal, only to have him turn around and it's actually him wearing an eye patch. In the episode commentary, Ryan Condal said something about Daemon being partly responsible for Aemond's creation. And this is interesting because apart from their little stare down in episode 8 of the first season, they've never really interacted. Aemond probably heard stories about his uncle that influenced him. He clearly admires him, and he would have seen him at Driftmark in episode 7, but they never interacted in any way. So Aemond kind of independently arrived at Daemon's status. His mentor and only human friend is cristoncole, who is a Daemon hater. He never saw Daemon with the long hairstyle that he now emulates. They dress kind of similarly. They both wear dark colored doublets with similar cut in the shoulders, but completely different materials and lengths. Aemond wears a leather doublet, while Daemon's are typically made of various textured brocades. Although after Daemon has the vision of himself as Aemond, the doublet he is wearing does appear to be at least partly made of leather. He awakes from his Daemon vision to find that he was sleepwalking again and has entered Alice's kitchen, not really sure what else to call it, a witch laboratory of some sort. And after he takes her potion, his visions start to bleed into waking life even more as he sees a serving woman as Laena. She is as she appeared in episode 6 when she told him that she wanted to go home and he refused her, and she soon after died in childbirth. Laena was even younger than Rhaenyra. This is another woman whose life he in a way stole and shaped to his own liking. She is also a symbol of his reluctance to return to Westerosi politicking and an escape he could have had that would have placed him far away from this conflict. We get an official introduction to Alice Rivers in this episode, and she is perfect. I love what they're doing with this character so much. They could have gone for the mysterious seductress it seems a lot of people were expecting, but despite being potentially magical or not even human, she feels so grounded and warm in a way that I was pleasantly surprised by. I love that they are using Gail Rankin's normal Scottish accent because no one else on the show has that accent, so it makes her sound like an outsider, maybe even outside of time. So far, Alice has done nothing that specifically confirms magical abilities. There is nothing in Fire and Blood that explicitly confirms these abilities either, especially with its shaky sourcing. It is possible that Alice was just a human woman who played into people's notions of her as a witch with theatrics and trickery. Or just a woman who was kind of weird and people thought she was a witch. But the way that this show is embracing the high fantasy elements, I highly doubt they'll go that way. There is also the question of whether she is actually human.
I'm no woman at all. I'm a barn owl, cursed to live in human form.
The barn owl comment could just be a joke, or it could be a hint at her wearing a glamour or being a skin changer. And even if she was not actually messing around in Daemon's mind, she clearly has a read on him and knows his weak spots. She recognizes the hit to his ego of having to obey Rhaenyra, and she even asks him if he is planning to make his own claim. Perhaps that is the end she is trying to manipulate him towards. I have some theories. Despite being reluctant to eat the food in the previous episode, Daemon drinks what he is handed without question. He could just be tired and dazed and convinced by this point that if they were going to poison him, they would have done it already. But it seems like Alice may have some sort of persuasive powers. I guess we'll see. After her meeting with Rhaenyra, Alicent is spiraling, now questioning Viserys' intentions and wondering even more if she did the right thing helping to place Aegon on the throne. We see she kept the dragon model she had repaired for Viserys all those years ago. The adhesive binding the broken wing together has yellowed over time, and it snaps off once more as it falls to the ground. This is clearly foreshadowing the death and disablement of dragons that is yet to come in this episode, but maybe it also represents the fragile piece of the realm. The cracks were already there, and it is so easily broken now that Viserys has died. Orwyle brings her moon tea under the pretext that it's for another of Aegon's victims. I assume many people in the castle suspect that there has been something going on with her and Criston. As a devout believer in the faith of the Seven, Alicent would believe that moon tea is murder and a grave sin. This is another moral compromise she has made for the sake of outward decency. Even if she wanted Cole's child, the stigma against bastards would destroy her reputation, not to mention the danger it would put him in, as it obviously would not be Viserys's, and probably many people suspect they have a secret relationship. When Larys comes to her quarters to see why she hasn't been at small council, he sees the cup and clearly knows what it is, giving him further leverage over her. Alicent is typically poised and presentable, but here she is slouched back in her chair with warm stones on her stomach, clearly feeling the side effects of the tea. It is notable how the material of her gown resembles the material of the chair she sits in. She has become furniture, unable to play an active role at court. It is also notable that it is more of a teal color than her usual green. Her meeting with Rhaenyra has left her doubting the green cause more and more. She is clearly scouring through the history books to look for evidence of the prophecy, and finds that Aegon has removed all of Viserys' history books from his quarters. She immediately suspects the worst and accuses him of destroying them. I will be the first person to defend Alicent when she is unjustly mischaracterized or blamed for things that are not her fault, but she's a deeply flawed person, like most people, and I would never say that she's a good mother. She is at her lowest, both physically and mentally, and she has zero fucks to give, so she lets loose on her son in a way she never really has before. This isn't a forceful scolding or lecture, it is a resigned mislike that cuts even deeper. The things Alicent is saying are valid. Aegon isn't wise just because he has a crown, and he should listen to others, and the best thing for him to do right now may be to take a step back. But the way she is saying them is still cruel. It's the worst thing he could hear right now.
Do simply what is needed of you. Nothing.
Much like her father, Alicent has a hard time understanding her children emotionally, and this blindsides her to the very human way Aegon responds to this. Alicent is in the process of potentially terminating a pregnancy. I'm sure she can't help but think about, what if I had done this 20 years ago? She is revisiting the trauma she experienced on her son, unleashing all of her resentment towards him and what he took from her. And she used the fact that he is a serial sex criminal as a pretext to get the tea in the first place, so that must be on her mind as well. But Aegon, as awful as he is, did not choose this life or this position any more than Alicent did. He has been treated like a puppet, not worthy of being taught to be anything more his whole life. He was never prepared for the role he was thrust into. No one takes him seriously or sees him as worthwhile, and it makes perfect sense that he feels he has to prove himself by doing something reckless. Another thing that motivates Aegon to do what he does is his tension with Aemond. I always enjoy brother squabbles. Their full-on boy fight at the end of the first season was absolutely delightful, but their conflict has become far more serious and high stakes. Larys, a confirmed fratricider himself, stirred some paranoia in Aegon last week about Aemond seeking to take his power, and that's only being furthered here when Aegon finds out that his brother has been secret pen pals with cristoncole behind his back.
The two of you have been plotting without my authority.
And of course, Aegon humiliated Aemond at the brothel, a culmination of years of bullying when they were younger that has pushed him over the edge. He also just doesn't take his brother seriously, and as we know, he thinks himself more fit to rule.
It is I, the younger brother, who studies history and philosophy. It is I who trains with the sword, who rides the largest dragon in the world. It is I who should be...
We see Aemond address his brother in High Valyrian, maybe partly to help him save face with the rest of the small council, but it is also a power move. Aemond speaks fluent High Valyrian. He even busted out the thesaurus. Even to someone who doesn't know the language, he has clearly shown up his brother, who can only clumsily spit out a few words. He also says, "our Kingsguard," instead of "your Kingsguard," which is interesting. And Orwyle at least does understand High Valyrian, so there's at least one other person in the room who knew what was said. Aegon is driven to storm out of the second council meeting after hearing Ironrod mention how valuable Aemond and Vhagar are, and when he goes to his quarters, he is met by his mother, who tells him he's useless. I did get the idea that Aemond deliberately left Aegon out of the plan with Vhagar, although even if Aegon knew, he may have gone anyway just to prove himself. Larys was the one who prevented Aegon from flying out to battle the first time. He has been the most adept at manipulating Aegon, mostly just by understanding his insecurities and treating him as a competent person when no one else in his life does. Larys and Mysaria are paralleled as the master mistress of whispers of their respective councils. Although Mysaria hasn't been named as such, both are outsiders in their own way, which helps them observe and remain unseen. Their positions are different. Larys is still a highborn lord of the largest castle in the realm, but his disability has separated him from traditional Westerosi masculinity and even his own family. His own kin use Clubfoot to demean him.
Larys Clubfoot is no lord of mine. He's a scourge upon this castle and this family.
And believe he murdered his father and brother, which, to be fair, he did do. Mysaria is an outsider in every way. She is a low-born foreigner, a woman who started out as a slave and who has built her way to wealth and her own form of power, only to have it all destroyed. Her position is far more tenuous. She has no wealth or holdings or family name to fall back on. Mysaria does seem to genuinely desire to help the small folk.
I would punish the High Towers for what they have done. But more than that, I know the struggles of the small folk of King's Landing.
She has a perspective on the lives that they live that may prove invaluable in weeks to come. She also has made no secret of wanting revenge on the High Towers, even if she blames the wrong one. And it is funny that Larys was actually the one who coordinated that. She and Larys were rival spy masters in King's Landing, and Larys took the opportunity to uproot her operation in favor of his own, and she doesn't seem to know that it was him or that her agents no longer breathe our air. He likely thinks her dead at this point, and Larys may know more than he is letting on about Harrenhal and what it does to people.
That castle is more crippled than I am, Your Grace. It's like to drive Daemon to madness as he attempts to make use of it, which is beyond his faculties.
There are theories about his connection to Alice Rivers that remains to be seen. There are theories of him being a skin changer as well and using the rats of the Red Keep to spy on people. In this episode, Rhaenyra finally tells Jace about Aegon the Conqueror's dream, in a callback to the scene where Viserys told Rhaenyra of the prophecy in the very first episode. This also takes place in front of a dragon skull. It is presumably the skull of Meraxes, the dragon of Aegon's sister wife Rhaenys, who died when a scorpion bolt took out her eye while fighting in Dorne. This was the first Targaryen dragon to die in battle. It is also foreshadowing the death of this show's Rhaenys, and it is a reminder of the consequences of sending dragons to war, to those dragons themselves. Aegon's prophecy has been an interesting and somewhat controversial addition to the show. We have seen it used as a meter of trust, as a vehicle of misunderstanding, and as a motivator for Rhaenyra to seek out her claim. I am not fully down with the Viserys deathbed Aegon mix-up, but I did talk in my video last week about how I do think it adds something interesting for Alicent's character arc. And I do think it may be worthwhile as a vehicle for the Greens to finally learn about this prophecy. And I do think that the Greens should know about the prophecy, and they should know about it more thoroughly. The dagger would be the best way for that to happen, and Aemond, lover of history and philosophy, now has it. So we'll see if that goes anywhere. Will he quite literally study the blade? I want the Greens to find out about the prophecy because I think it would be the best and maybe most true to George R.R. Martin's other work in this universe if the prophecy ultimately only leads to the destruction and near downfall of the Targaryen dynasty. I am not going to touch on what it actually means in the context of the ending of Game of Thrones. That's too depressing. But it has a chance to function in this story as a fulcrum of destruction, as Rhaenyra uses it to justify sending dragons to war. Apart from maybe Daenys the Dreamer foretelling the doom of Valyria, prophecy has never really helped anyone in this world that we know of, and that didn't help the Targaryens prevent the doom, only avoid it themselves. Knowing a prophecy has never helped anyone stop it from coming true. And believing you are the subject of some doomsday savior prophecy can lead characters down destructive paths. Just look at Stannis or Rhaegar. So much of the dance is a Greek tragedy. It would fit into that if the prophecy were ultimately pointless and futile and self-annihilating. If something meant to unite the realm led to it tearing itself apart. I initially thought the prophecy was being used to give Rhaenyra moral legitimacy, to make it seem like she is fighting for good and noble reasons, and not just for her own power. But I think that a better way to use it would be as her undoing, and I do think that is where they are actually going, probably. Rhaenyra feels more confident in her own supremacy now, in her birthright. Finding out that her father mentioned this prophecy in his final breath only reaffirmed this. She is saying, to unite the realm, I had to send the dragons to war, with a straight face. That's actually... Rhaenyra has been reluctant to send dragons to war because of the knowledge of Valyrian history Viserys bestowed upon her. When dragons went to war, everything burned. We had seen some of the collateral damage of dragon warfare in the first season when Caraxes stepped on that guy, but we see the horror at scale in this episode. I have actually really enjoyed Cristoncole as a character in these past couple episodes, now that they're actually letting him be good at something. I think that Fabian Frankel has really grown into this role, especially now that Cole is fully unleashed and able to be as brutal as he wants to be. This is him in his element, and it's scary. What he's doing here is horrific. He is sacking towns and forcing men to fight for him, and then using them as arrow fodder and dragon bait. But the brutality of dragon warfare has shocked even him. His plan is an incredibly vicious one that involved intentionally sacrificing hundreds if not thousands of men, but it is a solid one. If the dragons were going to have to start fighting, you want a plan to control the circumstances as much as possible. Vhagar is still a very large dragon, and Meleys might have spotted her from a long way off and flew away, but intentionally distracting Meleys with 2 different battalions and having Vhagar fly low over the trees that are a similar color to her maximizes her chances. At least I think that's what the plan was. I'm not a battle expert. It may still have gone south if Meleys had managed to beat Vhagar, which she had a shot at, especially in a true one-on-one. They were clearly overconfident in Vhagar's odds. Aemond didn't even wear armor into battle, just a cool new green leather coat. Maybe that's a costume budget thing, armor is expensive, but it also shows his hubris, which appears to still be quite unchecked. But as they say, no plan survives contact with the enemy, and sometimes a plan doesn't even survive the friction from within your own camp. There are maybe some questions as to Aemond's true intentions and motivations in this episode, but I think we can say without question that at the very least, he did not care if any harm befell Aegon. Aemond chose to delay when he saw Sunfyre flying above him. Maybe the plan would have been in jeopardy if Meleys were to see 2 dragons coming for her at once, and she might have decided to fly away. But if Aemond was truly as loyal as people seem to think he is, he would have prioritized protecting his brother over a military victory. I am not an expert on dragon combat, but it definitely didn't seem ambiguous to me that Aemond wished harm on Aegon. He went immediately for Dracarys instead of a claw or biting attack that might have posed less risk to Aegon. In the final scene, Aemond is already sheathing his sword before Cole cries out his name. The trajectory of his arm does not change, but that doesn't mean he wouldn't have finished the job if Cole hadn't shown up. It looked to me like he was sheathing his sword because he saw the dagger on the ground. Maybe he would have taken a page out of his uncle's book and used a rock. That's really a much better idea than a sword or dagger that will leave obvious wounds. Now, I don't think he was completely emotionless in the final scene, but he also didn't seem too messed up about it. I did like the scene in the brothel last week as a turning point for Aemond to finally stand up against his brother. It makes sense that humiliation would be a major catalyst for him. I like how this show shows that personal squabbles between the royals play out on this huge, horrific, destructive scale. I think that Aemond's arc this season so far would have benefited from dealing more with the fallout of Luke's death, because kinslaying is the biggest sin in Westeros. It's being used against Rhaenyra as propaganda over an act that she herself did not even commit. It's so weird that no one has talked about it, even behind his back. I don't think anyone has called him a kinslayer on either team. And Aemond Kinslayer is literally his historical sobriquet in the book. That act forever changes how he is perceived. And now he's officially a double Kinslayer, an attempted triple Kinslayer, but he didn't quite make the hat trick. Better luck next time, buddy. We saw him genuinely horrified and upset at the end of the first season. Now, I don't think he himself has really processed this. We will probably get to see some of that play out quite spectacularly later. It's very believable that Aemond would double down on the world thinking him a villain and decide he might as well become one. This is a realistic progression for the character. I just wish we had seen more of the journey between here and here. So R.I.P. to two queens. Rhaenys may have been the most experienced dragon rider in this world. She certainly has been flying the longest. And if she participated in the stepstones, as it is implied in this episode, she would have comparable experience to Daemon. We see her doing advanced maneuvers. She is clearly incredibly skilled and has a very deep bond with Meleys. Honestly, Rhaenys never quite worked as a character for me. I absolutely love Eve best, but I found some of her decisions confusing. I can understand why she would ally with the Blacks in order to protect her grandkids. Bella and Rhaena are Daemon's daughters. They were always going to be in this fight, but I'm not sure if I buy her seemingly overnight belief in Rhaenyra, especially if she still suspects that Rhaenyra had her son murdered. Maybe she doesn't believe that anymore, but it doesn't seem like the kind of thing you would just change your mind on immediately. I wish that Rhaenys could have found out that Laenor was alive before she died. That might have motivated her support for Rhaenyra as well. Rhaenyra wanting to avoid a war is good, but it doesn't automatically make someone a good leader. I don't see how that would override Rhaenys' previous issues with Rhaenyra. There was also the time that she murdered hundreds of people as a bit. That wasn't very chill of her, and I find it strange how the show has never acknowledged that, although maybe it will at some point. In this episode, we once again see Rhaenys willing to inflict untold damage on the general populace, but reluctant to be a kinslayer. She could have very easily Dracarys'd and killed Aemond once vhagar was brought down, but she didn't. She seemed like she was trying to disable the other dragons, but not outright kill them. She went for Sunfyre's wing and not his neck. And that's all well and good. I don't want to see dragons get killed either, but it shows the disparity as to which lives she sees as valuable. The final moments of Princess Rhaenys and Meleys echo those of Queen Rhaenys and Meraxes. Both were killed on impact when their dragons fell out of the sky onto a castle. The bond between Rhaenys and Meleys was depicted so wonderfully. Meleys turning back to look at Rhaenys one last time completely broke my heart. I still forgive you, Mima, but that was harrowing to watch. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Like and subscribe if you enjoy these videos. Thank you. Bye.
I'm next in line to the throne. Should they come looking for me, I intend to be found.